Growing up in the 90s, there were times where I just would kind of put my homework to the side and just focus on Michael Jackson. I'd memorize all the lyrics, and then my parents would be like, MJ Fangirl, you cannot get an A from knowing Michael Jackson lyrics. That's not part of your study curriculum, okay? But guess what? Parents, you didn't know. Here we are 25 years later, and it's possible to get a PhD in Michael Jackson studies. Now, you guys might be wondering, how is this possible? MJ Fangirl, tell us all about it. Well, I'm going to tell you all about it. I have a special guest today. Her name is Elizabeth Amisu, and she actually is pursuing a PhD in Michael Jackson studies. She's an author. She is really a Michael Jackson connoisseur and writes about so many other amazing, interesting topics, and she's here to talk to us today all about it. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you so much, MJ Fangirl. It's so amazing to be on the show.
Yeah, it's super great to be able to talk with you today. This episode is going to be so great because I know there are a lot of fans out there that want to learn more about Michael, that want to study him seriously, as an artist.
Yes.
And I feel yeah, what better time than now to kind of spread the word about the Michael Jackson academic studies, about some of the books we're going to talk about today. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's so exciting.
Yes. So, Elizabeth, first I want to mention to everybody. So, Elizabeth is the author of The Dangerous Philosophies of Michael Jackson, his music, his persona, and his artistic afterlife. Forward here is by Joe Vogel, who we know, and Karen Merks. And talk to us, Elizabeth, about what inspired you to not only write the book, but um, tell us, why should we study Michael Jackson?
Oh, wow. Let's start off with an easy question, shall we? Well, Michael Jackson really resonates on lots of levels. Like he's a popular entertainer. He's like one of the biggest, or for me, the biggest entertainer of all time. And he resonates on a really sort of like popular level of entertainment, of enjoyment, of fun, even on the other side of the spectrum, on the negative side of like emotion, of like anger and torment. He does those things really well as well musically. So he's a really wonderful artist to enjoy his work. But when you start to dig a bit deeper into his creative concepts, you start to see a lot more. And especially, looking at his autobiography, Moonwalk, I think Michael Jackson was really vocal about his art and about the way he created art. And I think we should study him for lots and lots of reasons. One of the main ones is his cultural and musical impact. That's one that has to never be denied. He's impacted artists all over the globe and in so many different ways over the course of decades. So that's just right off the bat. He's got this cultural impact that's just astronomical. And then we've got like lessons to learn, I think, from his life and his legacy. I think the way Michael Jackson was treated in the press, in the media, I think there's lessons to learn from that whole debacle. And I think the way he chose to live his life in terms of his attention to detail, his attention to the craft, his creative work, his creative artistry. I think those things are really important for us to learn from you know, yourself as an MJ academic and myself as a budding writer. I think he's really inspirational. I think Michael Jackson kind of can inspire you across all different genres of creative work. And then there's obviously, the complexity of human nature, which he teaches us through his music and his short films and his poetry, Dancing the Dream and everything he made. I think he teaches us a lot about the complexity of what it means to be human. And I think that he signifies in a way that I believe personally, people like William Shakespeare signify. I think that the artistry transcends generations and it transcends a lot of time in the way the works made will resonate throughout the generations. I think they have already and they will continue to do so into the future. And then there's obviously, creativity and confidence, like Michael Jackson is very inspirational in terms of getting all of us off our feet. he said this line in one of his songs, and he got kicked in the back. He said that he needed that, and then
Yeah.
and I just like this concept of keep moving, and he's very motivational as a speaker, as an artist, and I think he's got there's a very motivational energy that will resonate. And then obviously there's the classical influences in his work, the way his work is. What I term high status blackness, because he was the king of pop and he still is today, and how he resonates as a high status black musician, artist, and pop culture figure. I think it's very, very important because it resonates throughout the centuries. When we see black representation of high status characters on the stage, and that's obviously what I do in my PhD.
Yeah, I absolutely love all of that. Like, it's so interesting to me because there are so many facets of Michael Jackson as an artist, as a human being, as a trendsetter, as a change maker, and to actually have you put that into all those words and really talk to us about the importance of studying him. I don't know, it just makes me feel really excited because this is the seventh year of doing this show for me. And I've said that this is going to be my historian era. This is like my historian year. So I'm learning right along with everyone. And I'm really excited to hear more from you about this. I want to give people a little bit of a background on you, Elizabeth, because I just think that your background is so fascinating. Elizabeth, she's a London-based writer, scholar, and author whose work bridges fantasy, cultural studies, and Black identity. She's best known for her Sarkirdos mystery series, a richly imagined dystopian saga praised by the Huffington Post as a modern masterpiece. Now, with a background in early modern English literature and a PhD in progress at Bournemouth University, Elizabeth also writes on race, media, and the legacy of Michael Jackson. She's pursuing a PhD in Michael Jackson studies. Yes, this is a real thing, people, and it's so exciting. Is the author of fan favorite book, The Dangerous Philosophies of Michael Jackson, which we're going to talk about later on today, and also is the editor of the Journal of Michael Jackson Academic Studies. Now, tell us about that, because I have a flyer here. The Journal of Michael Jackson Academic Studies. There's a website, michaeljacksonstudies.org. There's books, essays, podcasts, columns. Can you talk to us? I think one of the main purposes of this is keeping the legacy alive. But what is Michael Jackson Academic Studies? What is the Journal of Michael Jackson Academic Studies?
Well, it's basically like an academic online journal, which was started in 2015 by myself and my co-editor, Karen Merks, who is just a powerhouse in like dissemination of Michael Jackson academic research. So what Karen decided to do in 2015 was that she wanted there to be a place where people could go and access academic resources on Michael Jackson, because there wasn't very many places you could go to do that. And there was a sort of a lull in academic research on Michael Jackson. And, if we compare Michael to people like Taylor Swift or Madonna, those people have sort of entrenched academic study of their work. That's just something that happens. Like there's symposiums on Taylor Swift, there is Madonna studies, and I believe that Michael Jackson deserves not the same, but even more research into the work he created.
Yes.
Because as he resonated for decades, and he's also such a versatile artist. His contributions to dance, his contributions to music, his contributions to composition, and I think that the journal is just this wonderful place where we sort of share academic research. We have a podcast called Michael Jackson's Dream Lives On, an academic conversation, which is an excellent place to start if you want to dip your toe into Michael Jackson academic studies. And in it, we review academic books, we have academic discussions, and we really delve into the whole journalistic research of Michael Jackson, which is emergent. It's emergent. And it was really kind of lacking before 2009. Before 2009, obviously, what happened? There was very little research done on Michael Jackson. It was just really sparse.
Yeah.
He did his Oxford speech, which was amazing, which I love that speech, and it inspired me to write the Dangerous Philosophies. And but in academia, he'd been really overlooked. And that was, one that I think that's a crime, really, that he was not respected in academia. His work wasn't researched well. People kind of believed he was instinctual as an artist, which I think is fine. He can have good instincts, but he was also creative. He constructed these artworks, he made them. And he had an intellect that is worth studying and is worth looking into.
Yeah, I think the part that you mentioned about him being instinctual, I think a lot of people think of Michael Jackson almost as, oh, this just happened to Michael Jackson. Like they don't really look into him and see like the work that was put in, things that influenced him. He was very to me, he was very intentional about a lot of
Very.
music that he put out, videos that short films that he made, different imagery that he used, different things he said, even in his interviews, the way he was strategic about building his career and his image as an entertainer, I think that was all very intentional. And so to have so many people think that he's not worth studying is just like mind blowing to me. I knew that I was always like looking for more books about him and looking for ways to learn about him, especially because he was kind of like he had this mystery surrounding him, right? He didn't give out
Yeah.
too many interviews. He wanted us to kind of want more. But like in that having happened, it's kind of like there's a gap in knowledge, at least for me. Like I was like, okay, how did this happen? Or like, why did Michael Jackson decide to like, use this certain classical song in the beginning of Will You Be There? Or, who was
Yeah.
he influenced by? And so I think that's really exciting. And the podcast is super exciting too. And I even see that there's a current call for papers. So you're kind of like, this is almost like a group effort, right? It's not just you guys are putting out these journals. You want other people in academia to contribute, right?
Yes, that's entirely what we need. I think what there is academically on Michael Jackson is quite sparse compared to other artists. And I was just thinking, if I was trying to think comparatively, maybe the Beatles and Elvis, they have loads of research that's been done on their work and loads of academic books about their work. And with Michael Jackson, it seems to be a case of like, why would you do that? And I think that that's really sad. I think what we need to see is a lot more a push towards more academic research of Michael's work, especially his dance. I think that's the area in which that it feels like so sad that there's very little academic writing on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And today I think we're gonna get into some books, right? That we've discussed and that that you've also recommended that really delve deep into Michael Jackson's artistry, and his development as an entertainer, his persona, and all that. So, yeah, maybe we can get started on this list because I've got to tell you, Elizabeth, I have done a couple of episodes that are like, oh, good books to read about Michael Jackson or books that I've read that I really love about Michael Jackson. And those are always so popular. And people always comment like years later. So that shows me that people are constantly looking for ways to learn about Michael. So let's get into this list. The first of the series is going to be, let's pull this up here. It's going to be Dangerous by Susan Faust. 33 out of 33 thirds. How do I say that? Is it 33
It's
one third?
33 and a third.
33 and a third series by Susan Fast. Dangerous. So, can you talk to us a little bit about this book?
Well, this book is like it's jam packed. It's a tiny, tiny little book, but there's so much in there. I feel like Dr. Susan Fast. I think she's a professor. I think she's a professor. She put so much into this little book that was kind of unexpected. Because it's from the 33 and a third series, and they do these. It's Bloomsbury, my publisher, and they do these amazing little books on albums. And they never covered Michael Jackson before, but the first Michael Jackson title that they did was the 100th volume. So it was the 100th issue of the books, and it was dangerous. And what Susan Fast discusses in this book is about Michael Jackson's coming of age album. She argues that his coming of age album was dangerous, that he kind of left behind his father figures and Quincy Jones and Berry Gordy, all those people from his past, and kind of moved into a new realm of artistry that is so complete, with the short films, with the album artwork, which was really inspired by Hieronymus Bosch. It's really complex, the artwork that was produced for the album, in terms of its signification, like just the images and in the cover were just, I love the cover so much. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. I love it too. It's just so interesting to look and see like all of the different scenes that are playing out within the cover that you don't notice until you really look into it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so beautiful. It's
yeah.
amazing. And like, what is it trying to signify? Michael Jackson was talking a lot about P.T. Barnum and circus and the media circus that was around him. And he wanted his work to be the greatest show on earth. And we have this combination of the album, the short films, and the tour, as well as the album cover, and they just work together so beautifully. And I think that Susan Fast really kind of touches upon that in a strong way. But then she also talks about sort of like the dark side of Michael Jackson's art, because he talks about, this one of my favorite songs is Who Is It? And it's really like, it's gritty, and dark, and it's something that people may not have been expecting to see from Michael Jackson in 1991, and I love that side of it, especially, when you put that in tandem with something like Heal the World, which is it's all on the same album. And then Michael Jackson was really going into like poetry as well with Dancing the Dream at this time. And I
Yeah.
think he was really like flexing his muscles in terms of his artwork. He's like, I can do this. I can write poetry. I can express myself in lots of new and interesting ways, and I can resonate with audiences in new ways. And I think that there was a sense in 1991 that maybe Michael Jackson was past it. And that's something, you keep hearing this thing about comeback. He's like a comeback album. This was a comeback album, because he disappeared and then he came back again. And I think that that's kind of a bit sad, because I think Dangerous works so beautifully in itself. It doesn't need to be rising to a specific challenge, though Michael Jackson did that beautifully.
I never thought of it that way, but you're so right. I mean, the way that he was so creative during this era, and this era did produce a lot of my favorites. The Dangerous album is my favorite album. The tour is my favorite tour. Dancing the Dream is just so awesome to read. Um, yeah, it's I definitely want to check this book out because, like you said, I think a lot of people look at it as his comeback, but also like I do feel like there's a segment of the population that also is like, anything after the trifecta of off the wall, thriller, and bad is just whatever. There are still some people out there that think that way. So to see the author give love to this album in the era is really, really cool. And
It's very cool. Go on.
yes. And no, I was just going to tell people to comment down below if you guys have read this, or if you've read any of these books. I know that I'm going to be posting links to all of these in the comments, in the description box of Spotify, YouTube, and all that. So now let's get into the next book, which is your book. And this is you with your book here. Was this at Kingvention?
That was Kingvention 2025. Yeah.
Oh, just this recent one.
Yes, the Kingvention just gone.
Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. All right. So if you guys don't know, there is a convention all about Michael Jackson. It happens annually I think it's in London, right? Is it every year in London?
It's usually in London, but it's been in America. I think it was in LA in 2024.
Okay. So I guess they do every now and then they might come to the US. I don't think I went to that, but I think I did briefly hear about it. But this is a convention where if you just want to be near Michael Jackson, like you're be surrounded by fans. They have panels and different things, and so I know that you've actually given lectures there as well, right?
Yeah, I have. I've been really fortunate. I gave a lecture there on an introduction to Michael Jackson studies in 2023. That was when they were in London, and then I did some talks on Michael Jackson and AI, and Michael Jackson and the academic void, preserving his legacy. Just last month.
Oh, I
So that's
love
kind
it.
of it's so funny talking about it because it was so recent.
Right.
But I think they've been really, the organizers, Pez and Sebastian, have been really wonderful in embracing academic study of Michael Jackson, because I think there's a little bit of resistance in not just the fan community, but in the general population. There's a sense that there's elitism in academia, and that
Mm.
maybe by letting Michael Jackson have his place in academia, that might take him away from the fans in some respects. And I think that that fear is really justified. I think it's like, I really understand that fear, but I do think academic appreciation of Michael will benefit everyone in the future and generations to come.
Yeah, for sure. And, how will people in the future, like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 years from now, learn about Michael? Like, to me, he deserves to be right up there with all of the classical artists, whether that's, all different types of mediums of art, whether that's people that have written plays or people that have created classic films or paintings, Van Gogh, and a lot of the other people that inspired him. Like, yeah, I agree that, he deserves that spot. And let's talk about your book. What inspired you to write this specific book? Because, I've started to read it, and, there are a lot of different things about it that I'm like, "Wow, I've never thought of Michael Jackson in that context." Like, there's even a part where you, kind of line Michael Jackson up, almost like a timeline comparing him with 7 other artists. I'm putting up the number 5, but I really meant 7, okay? So tell us about about that, about the book in general.
Okay, so the book came out of my research. I was doing research at King's College London with the British Library, and we were doing Shakespearean era. I did an early modern degree, a master's degree, and we were learning about, how to research in a different way that I had never learned before. And I thought, okay, this is fun. Let's see what, all the books and stuff about Michael Jackson. Because I love Michael and, he's my fave. So let's have a look. And I just couldn't find anything. It was really scary. I was looking for books. I assumed there would be loads of books. And there
Right.
was hardly anything about Michael Jackson. There were a few journal articles. There was a book, but it was in German, and then um, there was Man in the Music, and that was pretty much it. And
Wow.
and I thought that's not fair. I kind of assumed, I just thought to myself, that's not fair. That's not how it should be. I think Michael Jackson deserves his place in academia. I think he's the greatest artist of all time. He was the biggest entertainer of all time, and he's a black artist, which it resonated for me on that level, on that sort of level as a black woman. I strongly felt that there should be something. So I wrote an article, and it was called the dangerous not dangerous philosophy, it was called the mortal persona of Michael Jackson, throwing stones to hide your hands. And I was really upset at the time because I just felt that there was an injustice and I had to sort it out. And I just sent it off. I sent the article off, and I got no response. And then I was like, hold on a second, this article is fine, it's good, there should be something. As a silence is not good enough. There needs to be more about Michael Jackson in literature. And so I started writing a proposal for a book, because when I posted the essay online, loads of wonderful fans started reading it and writing to me about it. And it even caught the eye of Joseph Vogel, who was like my hero at the time because he wrote Man in the Music. And even he was like, oh, this is quite good. Well done. So I said,
Wow.
okay, I'm going to write a book. And the book is going to be really comprehensive. It's going to be the kind of book that I wish existed on Michael and that would inspire a lot of people to write their own books on Michael. It was supposed to be an impetus for people to write about Michael Jackson and to get that Michael Jackson in the library. I wanted him to be in the libraries. And I wanted it to be more than just Taraborelli's uh
Yes, the Magic, the Madness, the something like that, right? Magic
yeah,
and the
Magic
Madness.
and the Madness.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I have to say, as a kid growing up, going to the library during middle school, high school, that was the only book that was there. Like, seriously,
Same,
it was the only
same.
book. And like, I don't understand why. Like, I guess back then I get it because, maybe he was still alive. Maybe it was harder for people to study. Maybe it's easier to study people in retrospect. I don't know. But I was always like, why is there only this one book? Anyway, continue.
Yeah, thank you so much because it was Taraborelli and then it was Moonwalk. And I was like, I loved Moonwalk, but I was born in 87. So Moonwalk was like way back when. I was like, I want to know about his creative work now. I want to know about Invincible. I want to know about what Michael Jackson was doing with the Dangerous album, and history. And I want to know about all of that stuff. And I just got this inspiration from Michael's work that you could start to view him in a really like a long range view, the same way you view Shakespeare, because it's been hundreds of years. That if we could look at Michael Jackson like that, as if we're hundreds of years in the future, what would we want to think about him? What would his work be telling us? How would it be resonating for us? And I started writing all these essays that were going to come together as a bit of a puzzle or a mosaic to give people with different ideas and different perspectives an opportunity to have something to reference when they write about Michael Jackson.
Yes, and let me say this. I love how you put like you have all your references and there's just so you've given us what you've written but also so much more that we have the opportunity to look into and I love that. It almost like it's in it almost reminds me of like a textbook that I would want to keep after school. There's certain textbooks that you're like, okay, finish with that class, I'll put this to the side. But this is one that like you'd want to hold on to because it's just so good and it really makes you think about Michael Jackson in a different way. So I want to make sure that people know where to get your book in particular. Can you let everybody know because I know there's several different ways.
Yes, I think the main place to get it from is Bloomsbury, the publisher. So they ship it to all over the world. And then obviously there's my website, elizabethamisu.com. I always have copies that I can send out to you. Those are the two main places to get it. And obviously it's available on Amazon and most retailers that stock it. But it came out in 2024 in paperback. So, there was a whole big discussion. We were talking a lot about the price because when it came out in hardback, it was £74, which was fine for an academic book, but not so fine and accessible to fans who couldn't afford that. So it's much cheaper now, is it, that it's in paperback and it's much more portable and stuff. So yeah, it's available from Bloomsbury and it's available from me. And I'm just very excited to meet and talk to people who have read it and who are writing their own research on Michael.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this episode, watching, definitely reach out to Elizabeth and let her know your feedback. Like, let her know your thoughts after reading this. I have my copy right here. And again, all the links are going to be in the description box. Now, Elizabeth, I do have a short clip because I know you mentioned earlier that the Oxford speech kind of inspired you to write the book. And so, for people that don't know, the Oxford speech that Michael gave, it's a bit long, but I have a little clip of it that I thought I'd just play for some folks that might not be interested or not might not be familiar with it. So check it out.
I am humbled to be lecturing in a place that has previously been filled by such notable figures as Mother Teresa, Albert Einstein, Ronald Reagan, Robert Kennedy, and Malcolm X. I've even heard that Kermit the Frog made an appearance here. I've always felt a kinship with Kermit's message that it's not easy being green. I'm sure he didn't find it any easier than being up here than I do. As I look around Oxford, I can't help but be aware of the majesty and grandeur of this great institution, not to mention the brilliance of the great and gifted minds that have roamed these streets for centuries.
I wanted to bring that part up because it just reminded me of like how Michael Jackson was so aware of the greats and like people that made their mark in history. And I really feel like he wanted to also be regarded in that way. I really think that. And he talks about a lot of different things in this speech. He talks about his relationship with his father, and his just so many different things that are important to him. But what was it about the speech that stood out to you?
I think I find this speech very emotional, actually. Whenever I listen to it or read it, it was published actually in the Journal of Pan-African Studies, in its entirety, and that's where I first came across it. And I was quite happy to see Michael Jackson's words in print in an academic journal, because he talked about the dangerous philosophies, which for me are what I call them, but his words were faith, hope, and love. And I think that that's at the core of everything he did and everything he stood for. And he held on to that to the very end, that faith, hope, and love, that those are the three things that will endure. And I think, the fact that he mentioned the word love 42 times in the speech, really resonated with me. And I felt that he was very radical in his philosophy because it wasn't in keeping with the general trend of what people assumed was good. People are told that greed is good and being out for oneself is good and getting ahead is better. But Michael Jackson really believed in faith, hope, and love. And I really loved those concepts. And I think that that made him a very dangerous person because he was radically positive. He was radically good. He was intrinsically good. And I think that made him sort of a cultural threat. It gave him a certain level of power that he had through Thriller and his exposure to, culture, that I always believe was kind of dangerous. And I think he knew that. He definitely knew that.
I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna try to see if I can find. I haven't been able to see the full clip online. Have you seen it online? Because I want to be able to show that for people. Show that to people. If not, maybe I can link the actual text somewhere online for people to read.
The text is available.
Okay. I'm gonna try to see if I can find it online, and then we can link it in the description box for people as well. Okay, so let's move on to the next book that we're going to be talking about today, which is The Man in the Music, The Creative Life and Work of Michael Jackson by Joseph Vogel. I have a copy of this book. I don't have it with me here today, but this is one of my favorites. So talk to us about this book and, why should fans read this one?
Oh, wow. I think, this book is kind of like, it's a kind of a miracle of writing. I think it's just really, this is I think it's the 2019 edition. The version that you showed was 2011, which is, I've got that one as well. That's the one I originally read. And I just feel like what it does so beautifully was it encapsulates the eras in which Michael Jackson produced his work. So it encapsulates the context of his work, how it was produced, how it was received, and then it goes in depth into the work itself for each of his adult solo albums. And then it talks a little bit about his work up until he passed away, like his classical work, and the sort of the lost albums, lost work that we didn't get access to, and we still haven't had access to. But I think what it does so beautifully is it blends together creative artistry with the life that Michael Jackson lived. And
Yeah.
it shows that those two things were intrinsically bound together. You know, Michael Jackson wasn't separate from his art. He talked about things like, he said stuff like, I intend to bind my soul to my work. And I think that's a really powerful statement to make. And we talked about him being intentional earlier. And I think that not only was he intentional, but he was intrinsically an artist to be reckoned with. And the Man in the Music is just, I love this book so much because it encapsulates that. And I go back to it again and again. And I keep finding new things in there, which I didn't see before.
Yeah.
Sometimes he talks about tracks that I never knew existed. And then I go and look for them and listen to them. And I just think, oh, wow, this is amazing. So that's
Yeah.
Man in the Music.
I love what you said about that context and that background information, because that's why I love this book so much, because it really takes you through his life alongside the creative process. And you can kind of see, like, you know, what might have influenced him at the time, or what he was going through, or things he might have worked on. I also love how he talks about songs that were written at a certain period of time and then they were used way later on. That's also interesting. Like, I was just having a conversation the other day about the History album not too long ago, and like how Earth Song was written so many years earlier than when it was actually released. And I think that's something also that was in this book. So yeah, I really think that this is a good one for people to read alongside all the books that are in our list today. But it's also on Audible. So if anybody's out there that loves audiobooks, this is just something that I read every now and then on Audible. I listen to it when I'm doing busy work at work or whatever, and I just want to hear, because it's something that is really going to remind you of like Michael Jackson and his work and his creative process in an audio form. So I wanted to throw that out there because I know that I'm not the only one out there that loves audiobooks. So there's that too. And that's the updated version, I think, right? Because you mentioned this one that we've showed is the older version, and then he recently put another one out that removes some information or something, right? He doesn't talk about the music videos anymore.
There was a section in the 2011 version dedicated to the Michael album.
Oh,
And the
got
Michael
it.
album was really contentious. So I think the author, Dr. Joseph Vogel, just thought, let's focus on the adult solo albums. You know, let's get the focus back on Michael Jackson's work and his art and not on posthumous releases. However, I strongly suggest having both,
Okay.
you know, because the first one is so beautiful. It's got so many beautiful pictures in it. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's really a really beautiful book to own, you know, the 2011 version. And if you can ignore the bits that that don't chime with you, then I think you can really enjoy the illustrations alongside the words.
Got it. Okay. So we'll let people know. Get both copies, you guys. Hopefully we can still find the first one online. I'm sure it'd be available somewhere. So let's get into this next one, which is a book that I have not read, but I'm super excited to hear about. Michael Jackson and the Quandary of a Black Identity by Sherrow O. Pinder. Now, I want to know, what is this about?
Oh wow. Wow, that's just
I know, it's like probably a loaded
I think
question, right?
I'm thinking of an interview with Michael Jackson and he was like, oh boy, like, oh wow, this book is, as it is entitled, it's a really academic book. And it's really strongly about Black identity and what it means to be a Black person in America, to be an African American. And it's also about the definitions of Blackness in relation to whiteness, and how Michael Jackson sort of fell into a void of meaning because of his vitiligo and his skin change, and how that contributed to people not being able to understand him. Now, I've I'm still reading this book again and again because I'm using it a lot in my research, but I find it's like a very American perspective, which is important because Michael Jackson was an African American man. And I think that he was uniquely global as an artist, and that can sort of take away a little bit from his heritage because
Yes.
people like, yeah,
I was
you know,
just gonna say that because most recently here I did it was just a quick community post on Facebook to say like, hey, this is Black Music Month in the U.S. and this is how we celebrate. And I'm gonna be celebrating with great episodes about Michael Jackson all month long. And I got a couple comments that were like, let's not racialize Michael Jackson. And I'm like,
ooh,
uh, he was a black artist. Like I don't. And they're like, well, if you say black artist, then that means that he's not for everybody. But no, he was an African American entertainer. He was a black entertainer. And that's important to talk about when we talk about Michael Jackson. And I think, like you said, when you become so globally known, everyone is just like, he almost becomes like just uh ambiguous in a way to people because of the fact that he was just so globally accepted. But I think we miss so much of the important story and history of Michael Jackson when we don't talk about this black, part of his heritage.
I've not heard it said so beautifully before. So like that was just so beautifully said. I think you really got it, like he's inherently a black man, and that brings with it history. It brings with it a culture that he was really aware of. And
Yeah.
I listened to a recent episode that you did on Remember the Time, and I've been, writing and reading about Remember the Time, and I just think that was an affirmative, sort of affirmational expression of blackness that was necessary. I think those things are necessary, but there's a fear, I think, that acknowledging Michael Jackson's African American background will somehow take away from his globalness and
Right.
his, yeah, there's a fear. And I think those fears are understandable, but a lot of how Michael Jackson was treated in the press does have its roots in racism. He was famously called wacko in the press, and that was a whole racist epithet that had to do with it's in Man in the Music, but there was a lot of racist treatment of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And if you don't acknowledge that he was an African American, you can't acknowledge that he was treated wrong in a wrong way due to racism. So we
Right.
can't separate the two things. It's inherently part of who he is. Um, and I think that some of the ways in which Michael Jackson is depicted does touch upon racial thinking, and it's what I study in my research. I look at high status Black representations and how they may be seen as culturally important because the definitions of whiteness and blackness always work in tandem with each other.
Right.
So yeah, we see that over the centuries.
This is so interesting to me, and I can't now. I'm like, okay, now we've had this conversation. I'm definitely gonna dig into this later on. And
I'm
everybody, comment down below
excited.
if you guys have read it too. We want to hear from you, and we want this to be a discussion. Um, and then the last book that we have is called "Making Michael: Inside the Career of Michael Jackson" by Mike Smallcombe. Can you tell us about it? It's got a foreword by Matt Forger, who worked with Michael Jackson for a very, very long time. I believe he's sound engineer, and so much more. So let us know.
It's just a really beautifully written biography about Michael Jackson's career. And I think that, it says on the blurb at the back, it sidesteps sensationalism. And I think there's something really unique about that. Because in terms of biographies, I'm always looking for the academic biography. I'm like, I want the one that's like really specifically like,
Yeah.
and this is the moment, Earth Song started being written, and and this was what was happening in Michael's life, and blah blah blah. But I think this is the closest thing we have to an academic biography of Michael Jackson's work. It was published in 2016, and it was created from a lot of interviews with Michael Jackson's collaborators and colleagues. And I think it's just very, very well written. I think it portrays Michael Jackson in a very human light. It portrays him as a person, which is I think it's very easy to get into caricature when you talk about Michael Jackson because he was so global. He's superlative in so many ways.
Yeah.
I think, especially because of Thriller, I'm not, I'm a big fan of the album, but I don't particularly like what happened to Michael Jackson because of the album. I feel like the album kind of made it very difficult to kind of see him as a person. He became a brand and a trademark and, the, and not so much an artist, but more of a brand. And
Yeah.
I think that that's sad.
Yeah.
So what you gonna
No, I was just gonna agree with you 1,000%. Like, I feel like after that, people failed to see him as human. He was just almost like Michael Jackson, this like far away, like so far away from just us as like regular people. And that's unfortunate because it kind of strips him of like his humanity and like the emotions and all the things that influenced him and made him come out with these songs and have these ideas and all the creativity. So, okay, interesting. So this is not going to be like Magic and the Madness. This is going to be
No.
more, like you said, more research based, more based in fact, and not as gossipy as maybe that one was. Which is, hey, if I recently, like I said, I've been really wanting to learn more about the actual history of when things started, when the idea like came to mind, and then when it actually became something, like you said earlier. So I think this is going to be a really interesting one for people to check out as well.
Yeah, it's really beautifully written. And, it's one of the ones I go back to a lot. I just feel like it needs to be promoted as a biography, like a really powerfully written biography.
Awesome. Yeah, I love this list of books. So we've recommended the 5 books, but also you guys, you've got to check out the Michael Jackson Academic Studies again at michaeljacksonstudies.org. And Elizabeth, I just have to ask you because I know a lot of people are out there are wondering, and I'm wondering too, because like I said, I've always felt like I was like, I was like almost having my master's in Michael Jackson studies in my mind, but like, what is it like actually pursuing a PhD in Michael Jackson studies? Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh my goodness. It's so humbling, I feel very fortunate. I feel very, very fortunate to be doing this work. And I feel like the work is important. And I feel like the artist is incredibly important to so many people for so many reasons. And I think that it's something that I want to get right. I just feel like it's very, very important that now that I've been given this opportunity, because it took me 8 years to get the PhD accepted. It was rejected. And I think that has to do with a lot of the things that kind of happened around Michael's name and, people saying certain things about him. And unfortunately, it took me a long time to get here. But I think because it took me a long time to get here, I'm really kind of up to the challenge of the research. And I think it's incredibly enjoyable as well. There's something about Michael's work that resonates and that inspires. And that's fun because I get to do that on a daily basis.
That is so cool. And I can't wait to hear what's coming next from you. What is there anything coming up next that you want to tell us about, or where can we follow you if we want to know what's coming up next? Because I know that you're always writing, always working on things in the background. Maybe there's a lecture that people can go and check out. Where can we learn about that?
Okay. So most of my output comes through my website, elizabethamisu.com. But my academic work on Michael goes through the journal, michaeljacksonstudies.org. and the podcast, Michael Jackson's Dream Lives On. So everything that is coming up will always go through Michael Jackson's Dream Lives On. And I loved this relationship between you and I, MJfangirl. And I hope that I'll be able to bring out, new things and exciting research that's coming out with you, and show it to, your listeners, and
Yes.
share it with them, because I think it's an exciting time, because this is the opportunity for them to make their mark. I don't think they realize how, pressing that is, how important it is.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to have you back on the show. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of what we could even talk about here. But this is such a great start for people to learn about where they can start to learn and like seriously study Michael Jackson. We've got books. We've got michaeljacksonstudies.org. Also, if you're a writer out there, if you're studying Michael Jackson, because there have been people that have said, hey, MJfangirl, I'm doing a paper, or I'm doing this or that. Maybe that would qualify to be in the journal. Like, hey, everybody reach out and let's be all a part of preserving Michael Jackson's legacy for the next generation, right?
Yeah, that's what it's all
Yes.
about.
Now,
Because he's
Elizabeth,
brought us so much joy, and I think he can keep on doing that for generation after generation.
yeah, I'm excited about it. I mean, we have a 2-year-old at home that's loving Michael Jackson so far. Sometimes yesterday I was playing Stevie Wonder in the car, just randomly a playlist, and she was like, I want to hear Michael Jackson. So I was like, okay, I'll change my song for you, of course. So we hope that this will last for generations to come. Elizabeth, thank you so much for all of your work in preserving Michael Jackson's legacy. I think it's amazing at what you're doing, and I cannot wait until you come back to the show. Maybe because I know that we had talked a little bit about like busting some myths and stuff. We didn't really get into that today because there's so many myths that we can bust and like tell people like what the true story is. So maybe you can come back for that. Would that work? Yes.
Be
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
That'd be
Oh,
awesome.
yes, I love it. Well, everybody, I'm gonna let everybody know where they can follow the show. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, again for being on here. And everybody, you can follow the show everywhere that you listen to podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. You can also find us on YouTube channel. Help us get to 50,000 subscribers on MJ Fangirl TV, and join the Patreon. Joining the Patreon membership is where you get access to full in-studio episodes ad-free. I post it there for you guys before anybody else gets them. I also have candid story times, unboxings, reaction videos. Some of you guys are like, MJ Fangirl, where are the reactions? They're all going to be on Patreon. So it's only $4.99 US dollars a month. So definitely go and support, whether you support once or monthly. I always appreciate it. It helps to keep the show going. Thanks again to Elizabeth Amisu. Definitely go ahead and check out all the books on the list, but definitely check out The Dangerous Philosophies of Michael Jackson. Check out the Michael Jackson academic journals, and maybe you can be a part of making your mark in Michael Jackson's history. I'll check you guys out next time. Bye-bye.